Jack Avery had long ago stopped expecting visitors. His ranch sat at the edge of the valley, surrounded by dry grass, stubborn hills, and too many memories. Once it had been a place of laughter, warmth, and home-cooked meals. But that was before Clara died, before silence took over. Now it was just work. Feed the horses, mend the fence, chase off coyotes, and repeat. That morning, Jack rode into the dusty town of Whistler's Bend. He didn't come often, just when supplies ran out or the animals needed feed. But today, he came with a single folded sheet of paper tucked in his shirt pocket. He hammered it to the side of the general store where folks pinned up missing dog notices, traveling circus flyers, and church potlucks. Farmhand needed. Room and board included. He signed it only. J. Avery Willow Bend Ranch. It was more than desperation. It was surrender. The ranch had grown too much for one man's hands. His knees ached and the barn roof sagged. He had no sons, no brothers, and most of the hired hands who once passed through were now scattered by better pay down in Texas or out west. He didn't expect much. Maybe a drifter. A man down on his luck. He even imagined a lean fellow with sunburnt hands and a head for horses. Someone who wouldn't ask about the empty bedroom in the farmhouse or the photograph still sitting by the kitchen window. But no one came. Not the next day. Not the next. The chickens roamed a little too far. The troughs dried a little faster, and Jack felt his strength thinning like the paint on his porch. Then, on the fifth morning, just as the sun had barely lit the frost off the grass, he saw someone standing by the gate. Not a man, not even a full-grown woman. A girl. She couldn't have been more than 17, though her eyes said older. She stood still, arms crossed over her chest, her dress stained and hanging loose. She wore no shoes. Her feet were cracked and raw from the gravel. A thin cut bled slowly across her cheekbone. But she didn't flinch, didn't speak. Jack stared at her from the porch, a coffee mug warming his hands. He wasn't sure if he should speak first or just wait. After a long silence, she pointed to the paper he'd posted, now folded in her hand. "I saw this in town," she said. Her voice was flat, almost hoarse. "I can work." Jack stepped down slow. "You got a name?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Where are you from?" He tried. Silence. He looked her over again, barefoot, bruised, starved. Everything in him screamed, "Don't do this." But something deeper whispered, "You already did." He cleared his throat. "You can sleep in the barn. You eat with me at sundown. You don't steal, you don't lie, and you don't leave the horses thirsty. That's the rule." The girl nodded once, sharp. Jack turned and walked toward the barn. She followed him, without a word. He showed her the corner with some fresh straw, pointed to the water pump, handed her an extra wool blanket. No questions asked. As he stepped out, he paused. "You'll need boots," he said over his shoulder. She didn't reply. That night, Jack set 2 plates on the table. Simple beans, cornbread, and stew. The girl ate like she hadn't had a meal in days, eyes darting toward the door every few minutes. He didn't press her. Didn't ask where she came from, who hurt her, or why she walked all the way out to the edge of nowhere. He figured, in time, she might tell him or not. He'd learned how to wait, but long after she'd gone out to the barn, he sat staring at the empty seat across from him. The one that used to belong to Clara. Funny thing was, it didn't feel so empty anymore. She didn't give her name. Jack didn't ask again. The next morning, before the sun had cleared the ridge, he found her already at work hauling buckets to the trough, sleeves rolled to her elbows, arms shaking with the effort. She moved stiffly, wincing with each step, her bare feet wrapped in scraps of old feed sack tied with twine. Jack said nothing, just handed her a pair of worn boots from a trunk in the tack room. Might be a size too big. he muttered. She took them without a word and didn't look him in the eye. By noon, the girl was in the stables brushing down the mustangs like she'd known them her whole life. The horses, usually wary of strangers, leaned into her hands like they trusted her more than him. Jack stood in the shadows, watching. There was a kind of quiet strength in the way she moved, not polished, not trained, but natural. Like she'd spent years around animals and nowhere near people. Over the next few days she worked hard. Too hard. She pulled more than her weight. Mending fencing with blistered palms, hauling hay, scrubbing troughs. She never complained, never sat down, never asked for anything. She also never smiled. Jack couldn't decide if she was running from something or simply didn't know how to stop moving. Either way, he let her be. One evening, after supper, Jack leaned against the porch railing, sipping coffee. The sky was painted with streaks of fire and lavender, the kind of sunset that used to make Clara hum while she shelled beans. The girl sat a few feet away on the top step, knees drawn up, eyes fixed on the fields. You ever work a ranch before? Jack asked. She nodded once. Sort of. Her jaw tightened. My mama kept goats. He waited for more. But that was all she said. That night, while locking up the feed shed, Jack found a small bundle tucked under the overhang, a ragged piece of cloth wrapped around a locket. It was worn, the chain broken, the clasp dented. He knew better than to pry, so he left it alone. But the next morning, he left the locket on a clean rag on the edge of her breakfast plate. She stared at it for a long time before slipping it into her pocket and whispering, "Thank you." It was the first softness he'd heard in her voice. That evening, he gave her a proper bed. The guest room had sat untouched for over a year, dust thick on the quilt, the window cracked. He cleared it out, not saying a word. Just left the door open and a clean towel folded on the bed. She paused when she saw it just for a moment, then carried her things in quietly. She never said she was grateful. But when Jack came down the next morning, the stove was warm and coffee was already brewing. His old dog, Buster, lay beside her chair like he'd known her all his life. Something had shifted. Small but real. As summer deepened, the days grew longer and hotter. Jack noticed her skin darkening under the sun, her shoulders stronger. She didn't just follow instructions. She started making her own rounds, checking fence posts, watching the cattle, even making a log of feed rations. Jack never said it aloud, but he was impressed. No boy he'd hired in years had shown half her grit. But every night, she'd sit on the porch just after sundown, staring at the tree line. Like she was waiting, or remembering, or maybe hoping no one found her. One night, without looking away from the dark horizon, she asked, "You got family?" Jack answered slow. "Had a wife. No kids. She passed a while back." The girl nodded. "I had a mama. She passed too. That was all. 2 people. 2 losses. One quiet place to survive in. He didn't know her name or her story, but she was no longer just a girl with no shoes. She was part of the ranch now, and he wasn't quite so lonely anymore. The storm rolled in just after midnight. The wind howled through the cottonwoods like a pack of wolves, shaking shutters and rattling doors. Thunder cracked sharp across the sky, followed by the heavy drum of rain pounding the tin roof. Jack Avery sat up in bed, listening. Not to the storm, but to something else. A sound beneath the thunder. Crying. It was faint, muffled, but it didn't belong to the wind. He pulled on his boots and grabbed a lantern. As he stepped outside, the rain slapped hard against his coat. He crossed the yard, mud sucking at his heels, and pushed open the barn doors. There, curled in the corner between 2 hay bales, sat the girl. Her boots were off. Her knees hugged her chest. Her face was hidden in her arms, shoulders trembling. A broken chain hung loosely in her hand. The locket he'd returned to her sat in the dirt, open. Jack didn't speak. He stood there for a long moment, letting the rain beat the roof, letting her cry without interruption. Eventually, she looked. Up, eyes red-rimmed and wild. "I didn't hear you," she whispered. "I didn't mean to sneak up," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "You all right?" She swallowed hard. "It just broke. I didn't mean to drop it." He picked up the locket carefully. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman-eyes kind, hair dark like the girl's. The other side held a pressed wild, flattened and brittle with age. "Your mama?" he asked. She nodded, wiping at her eyes with her sleeve. Jack didn't press. He simply held out the locket. Her fingers trembled as she took it. "I used to hold it when things got bad," she said, voice cracking. "Just hold it and pretend she was still near." "She is," Jack said quietly, "just not the way we want." For a long moment, the storm was the only sound between them. Then, in a voice barely above the wind, she said, "Lena." Jack blinked. "What, my name? It's Lena," he nodded slowly. "Lena." It suited her, simple, strong, scarred. She looked down. "I ran away. From my stepfather. He hit me. A lot. After Mama died, it got worse. I tried to stay until I turned 18. But I couldn't." Jack clenched his jaw. His hands itched with anger, but he stayed still. "You're safe here," he said. "I won't send you back." She looked at him, searching his face for truth. "You don't even know me." "Don't have to. I know pain when I see it. And I know hard work. You've shown me both." Her lip trembled. "They'll come looking. Let 'em," he said. "This is my land. You're under my roof. If they want trouble, they'll have to go through me." That was the first time she smiled. Just a flicker, but real. Jack stood and offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her hand was small, rough with calluses, but she held tight. He led her back to the house, gave her a clean towel, and left her in the hallway while he made cocoa one of the last cans Clara had bought before she passed. He hadn't touched it in years. When he returned, Lena was seated by the hearth, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the fire. He handed her the mug. "Can't promise it tastes good, but it's warm." She took a sip and smiled again. "It's perfect." For the first time in a long time, Jack felt the house breathe, not groan with emptiness, not echo with silence, but breathe. The storm outside raged on, but inside, something quieter took root. Trust. It was small, fragile, but alive, and it would grow. By the time spring gave way to summer, the frost had vanished from both the fields and from the corners of Jack Avery's heart. The land came back to life in waves. Sap rose in the trees, the creek filled again with meltwater, and wildflowers bloomed where Lena had scattered seeds near the barn. She'd said her mother loved flowers, so Jack let her have that corner of the ranch to tend as she pleased. Lena, for her part, moved through the work like she was born to it. She learned fast how to patch a split rail, how to sense when a horse was uneasy, how to use a branding iron without flinching. She never backed away from the harder chores and never needed to be told something twice. She was no longer the girl who had arrived barefoot and silent at the gate. She was part of the land now, tough, rooted, and resilient. And Jack? He began fixing things he had left untouched for years. The screen door that had sagged since Clara passed, the broken clock on the mantel, the squeaky floorboard in the hall. Small things, maybe, but every nail, every turn of a screwdriver felt like taking back a piece of the life he thought he'd buried with his wife. One quiet evening, while mending a fence post at the edge of the northern pasture, Lena looked up and said, "You don't talk much about her." Jack paused, hammer in hand. He didn't need to ask who she meant. "Not much to say that wouldn't hurt," he replied. Lena didn't press. She just nodded, like she understood, and she did. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was shared, comforting, like two people walking beside each other with different wounds, but the same weight. Still, not everything was peaceful. One afternoon, the sheriff rode out. He wasn't a bad man, just curious. Word had spread in town that Jack had taken in a young girl, no kin, no history. Questions floated like dust in the saloon. Who is she? Why won't she go to school? Is it right for her to live out there with him alone? The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man named Cordell, tipped his hat when Jack stepped off the porch. Just checking in, he said casually. Folks are talking. Jack didn't smile. They always do. Cordell glanced past him to the barn, where Lena was brushing down the gelding. That girl back there, she yours? Jack's voice was even. She is now. Cordell studied him a moment. No papers, no record. You know the county might have something to say about that. Jack crossed his arms. Then the county can come out here and see the work she does. Sun up to sundown. Ain't a mouth in town works harder. She's not hurting anyone. She's healing. We both are. The sheriff didn't argue, but he left with a warning in his eyes. That night, Jack told Lena about the visit. She didn't look surprised. I can leave, she said softly. If I'm putting you in trouble, I can go. Jack shook his head. This place is your home now. If someone tries to take you, they'll have to take the whole ranch with them. She looked down, then back up at him, her eyes glossy. I don't want to go. Then you won't. It was simple. Final dot, and from that day forward, Lena stopped waiting to be chased. She planted herbs by the kitchen. She learned how to balance the ranch's books. She painted a sign by the front gate that read, Willow Bend Ranch, Est, 1882. Home to horses and second chances. Jack hadn't asked for that. But when he saw it, he didn't have the heart to stop her, because it was true. The ranch, once a place of loss and dust, now had color again. The silence no longer felt like mourning. It felt like peace. And in the quiet rhythm of shared labor and gentle trust, Jack and Lena began to build something new. Not a life that replaced what had been lost, but one that honored it and grew beyond it. The whispers started slow. First at the general store, then at Sunday church, and eventually in every corner of Whistler's Bend. That girl out there with Jack Avery, what's her story? She came out of nowhere, didn't she? Not? Right, a man his age living alone with a girl like that. She don't go to school. She don't go to town. What are they hiding out there? Jack had heard whispers before. It was the kind of town that never stayed quiet for long. But this town felt different, sharper. Accusations hidden behind polite smiles and lowered voices. Folks didn't ask him directly, but their eyes said plenty. And Lena felt it, too. When she rode into town for flour or feed, eyes followed her. When she paid with Jack's money, shopkeepers stiffened. When she said thank you, no one answered. The town's warmth had turned brittle. One afternoon, while tying her horse outside the mercantile, Lena overheard a woman mutter to another, "A shame, really. Poor thing don't know what she's gotten herself into." Lena pretended not to hear, but the words carved deep. Back at the ranch, she slammed the gate harder than usual. Jack noticed right away. What happened? He asked, wiping oil from his hands. She looked at him, jaw clenched. They think I'm something I'm not. He didn't have to ask what she meant. Jack had been a younger man once. He knew how minds worked when they lacked facts but had time to gossip. A man his age taking in a young girl with no kin people. We're bound to twist it into something ugly. That evening, the sheriff came again. This time, not alone. He brought with him a woman in a gray skirt suit and glasses too big for her face. She introduced herself as Miss Halbridge, County Child Welfare. "I've had some reports," she said stiffly, flipping open a notebook. "Concerns, really. About the girl living here. Jack narrowed his eyes. She has a name, Lena. The woman cleared her throat. Is she related to you? No. Are you her legal guardian? No, Jack replied firm. But she works this land, eats here, sleeps here. And I treat her like kin. Lena stood beside him, back straight, face pale. Miss Halbridge turned to her. Lena, is he forcing you to stay? Has he ever touched you in a way that— No. Lena snapped, stepping forward. He's the only person who's ever treated me like I mattered. The woman blinked. Still, we'll need to file a report. There may be a temporary relocation while we sort things. No, Lena said again, louder this time. You can't take me. She's nearly 18, Jack added. Just a few months shy. You really gonna pull her off of working? Ranch where she's safe and earning her keep? Miss Halbridge glanced nervously at the sheriff. It's protocol. Cordell shifted in his saddle. Sometimes protocol's dumb, he muttered. Miss Halbridge sighed. I'll be back with a petition. You should consider legal guardianship or some kind of formal arrangement. Mr. Avery, this situation isn't going to hold up under pressure. And with that, they left. That night, Lena sat on the porch steps, chin resting on her knees. I should have never stayed, she said quietly. I've caused trouble, Jack shook his head. You didn't cause anything. You showed up, hungry and hurt. That's not a crime. But they'll never leave us alone, she whispered. Looked out across the fields, where the moonlight draped the pastures in silver. Then we fight, the legal way. We'll make it official. She turned toward him slowly. You do that? Adopt me? Jack didn't hesitate. I should have done it the day you told me your name. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't. Let them fall. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. Asterisk. The fire started just after midnight. Jack had fallen asleep in his old rocking chair, the legal paperwork for guardianship half filled on the kitchen table. Lena had gone to bed hours earlier, worn out from planting new rows in the yeast field. Then came the smell. Smoke, sharp, bitter, wrong. Jack shot up, hard hammering, and ran to the window. A glow pulsed against the darkness. The barn. It was burning. Lena! He bellowed, already yanking on his boots. She met him at the door barefoot, eyes wide with terror. The horses, they didn't waste a second. They ran together through the smoke-thick yard. Jack grabbed a bucket. Lena unlatched the paddock gate. Flames licked through the dry wood of the barn wall, already reaching the roof beams. The horses inside screamed, thrashing in panic. Easy, easy, Jack soothed, coughing hard, yanking open the stall doors as Lena led them one by one into the pasture. The last horse, the skittish roan Lena had gentled herself, refused to move until she climbed inside, threw her arms around its neck, and whispered something into its ear. Only then did the horse bolt out into safety. They saved every animal, but they couldn't save the barn. By sunrise, only a blackened skeleton remained. Tools, hay, saddle gear all ash. The air still smelled of smoke and heartbreak. The sheriff showed up just after dawn, dismounting slowly as he took in the wreckage. Found? Tracks, he said grimly. 2 sets. Looks like someone broke the lock. Lantern oil was spilled near the wall. This wasn't no accident. Jack didn't reply. His face was grim, jaw tight. He knew exactly what this was, a message, a warning, maybe even an attempt to scare them off before the adoption became official. Cowards. Lena stood nearby, wrapped in an old blanket, streaks of soot on her face. But her eyes, those stayed fierce. Let them come back, she muttered. Next time I won't run. Jack put a hand on her shoulder. You won't have to. They won't touch what's yours again. That day they didn't rest. Together they salvaged what they could. Jack hammered together a makeshift shelter for the horses. Lena pulled buckets of water from the well, cleaned the animals' wounds, and wiped ash from their hides. They didn't speak much grief, didn't leave room for many words. But they worked side by side like always. That night, with the stars scattered cold above them and the barn reduced to embers, Jack pulled an old box down from the attic. Inside was Clara's last journal. Her handwriting still crisp and careful. Tucked within its pages was something else, a yellowed form never filled. Adoption papers. Jack stared at it, stunned. Clara had wanted a child. They'd talked about it once. And here it was unfinished, waiting. He brought it to Lena, holding it out like it was sacred. "She'd have loved you," he said. "She saw this long before I did." Lena looked at the paper, then up at him. "We don't need a barn," she said. "We just need this," he nodded, "and maybe a good pen." The next day, they rode into town together, heads high, shoulders straight, ash still staining their sleeves. When they entered the courthouse, the townspeople stared. But no one said a word. Jack walked to the clerk's desk and asked for the adoption petition to be expedited. The clerk blinked at him. "And your reason?" Jack placed the burned locket on the counter. "Because family doesn't wait." By week's end, they had a court date, and for the first time since the fire, Lena smiled like she believed the future might hold not fear, not running, but belonging. The courthouse was colder than it should have been for a summer morning. Jack Avery sat stiffly in the front row, worn hat resting on his knees, boots freshly polished out of respect. Beside him, Lena shifted in her seat, shoulders squared, wearing a borrowed dress from the preacher's wife. It wasn't her style, she preferred denim and dust, but today was different. Today, the law would decide if what they already knew in their hearts could be made real. The room wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. A few curious townsfolk had come, including Miss Halbridge from Child Welfare, who sat with a clipboard in her lap and an unreadable expression on her face. Sheriff Cordell stood in the back, arms folded, nodding when Lena caught his eye. Judge entered with quiet authority, an older woman with weathered eyes and a steady gaze. She glanced at the file, then at the pair seated before her. "Mr. Avery," she began, "you're petitioning to adopt Miss Lena." "She hasn't listed a last name." Jack stood. "She can choose the name she wants," he said plainly. "But she's been living with me, working the land. I feed her. She eats at my table. I'd give my life for her if it came to that." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you aware of the ... perception surrounding your situation?" "I am," he sighed, "and I don't care." Lena stood slowly, eyes bright but voice calm. "Your Honor, I'm not here because I needed charity. I came to survive. And he gave me more than shelter, he gave me back my dignity." The room was quiet, except for the soft scribble of Miss Halbridge taking notes. "I was scared when I got here," Lena continued. "I didn't trust anyone. I thought people were only there to take things from you. But Jack never asked for anything. He just kept showing up, with warm meals, warm boots, and a place I didn't have to keep running from." The judge leaned forward. "Do you want him to be your legal guardian?" Lena nodded. "I want him to be my family." Jack's throat tightened. The judge turned to Miss Halbridge. "Does the welfare department object?" Miss Halbridge hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "No, Your Honor. The girl is nearly 18. She's clearly found stability. Frankly, more than we could offer her anywhere else." The judge exhaled, then signed the top form. "This court recognizes Jack Avery as the legal guardian and adoptive father of Lena Avery, effective immediately." For a moment, no one moved. Then Lena reached for Jack's hand, and for the first time in a courtroom built for decisions and deadlines, something unspoken and sacred filled the space: belonging. They walked out into the sunlight side by side. As they stepped onto the courthouse steps, a few townspeople offered polite nods. The preacher's wife handed Lena a bouquet of wildflowers. Sheriff Cordell tipped his hat. Miss Halbridge approached before getting into her car. "You're a lucky girl," she said gently. Lena smiled. "I'm not lucky. I'm home. Back at the ranch." A neighbor had left a note on their gate. "Heard about the adoption. Congratulations. If you need help rebuilding the barn, just holler." Signed, the Millers, plus 3 other names. Jack read it and nodded, then handed it to Lena. "Looks like we ain't so alone after all." She smiled as she tucked it into her pocket. That evening, Jack hung a new nameplate on the house gate. The Avery Ranch established by grit. Bound by choice. Asterisk years passed. The land healed first. Then the people. Grass grew thick again where the barn had burned down. A new structure stood in its place, stronger, wider, built with the help of neighbors who once whispered but now waved when they rode by. The ranch that had teetered on the edge of silence now rang with hammering nails, barking dogs, and most surprisingly, laughter. Lena Avery, no longer just the girl with no shoes, had grown into herself. She stood tall now, not just in height but in presence. Her hands were still rough from ranch work, but they moved with surety. She taught younger children from broken homes how to ride bareback, how to tend to calves, and how to plant flowers in soil that once seemed too hard to bloom. Some of them came quietly, bruised in ways you couldn't see. Others arrived angry, half wild from what life had done to them. But Lena saw them, really saw them, the way Jack once saw her, and like her, they stayed. The Avery Ranch became known for something more than cattle. It became a place of refuge. A place where second chances were not given, they were earned together. Jack had grown older. His hair turned silver, and his knees complained louder than they used to. But he never missed breakfast with Lena or a ride to check the west fence line. He didn't call her kid anymore. He called her daughter, and every time he said it, Lena smiled. On warm evenings, they'd sit on the porch just like always, coffee for him, tea for her, watching the land they'd saved together stretch wide under the painted sky. Buster, the old dog, had long since passed, but 2 pups now dozed under the swing, and Lena's Mustang grazed in the paddock just beyond. "I keep thinking about that first day," Lena said one evening, her voice soft. "How you didn't ask questions, just let me stay." Jack chuckled. "I asked a few. You just didn't answer." She laughed, leaning back in the chair. "Still, most folks would have turned me away." He shook his head. "You were just a kid with fire in your eyes. Didn't scare easy. Reminded me of Clara in a way." Lena looked toward the horizon. "She'd have liked this place now, I think." "She'd have loved it," Jack said. They fell into silence again, comfortable, steady, and then Lena pulled a small box from her lap and handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it." Inside was a photo, faded but familiar. It was the one from her locket, her mother's face now framed. Next to it, a newer picture. Lena and Jack standing beside the rebuilt barn. Dirt on their clothes, sun in their eyes. "I had it printed," she said. "Thought it was time to put both sides of my life together." Jack stared at it for a long time before swallowing hard and clearing his throat. "Pretty good shot," he said, voice rough. She grinned. "Thought so." As the sky deepened into dusk and the stars began to blink awake, Lena stood up and looked around. "You know," she said, "I think I came here looking for a job." "Maybe a warm meal." Jack raised his eyebrows. "That so?" "But I got a home, a father, a life." He nodded. "And all I posted was a help wanted sign." Lena laughed. "Guess we both got more than we expected." She turned back toward the house, the porch light flickering on behind her like a lighthouse in the dark. and Jack watched her go, his daughter. Once a stranger at his gate, now the soul of the ranch, she'd arrived barefoot and broken, and she stayed forever.